Hi, I'm Don from DonDronesOn. Today I'm in Kanata, Ontario at the Carleton University facility where we have a Create program workshop happening. And I'm going to have Jeremy and Solomon talk about what that program is and what happened today. Jeremy.
Yeah, so today was our seventh CREATE program workshop. We've been having these workshops since fall of 2019 when this NSERC CREATE program was first funded. And our program full title is Uninhabited Aircraft Systems Training,
Innovation and Leadership Initiative.
Yeah. And so the NSERC CREATE Uninhabited Aircraft Systems Training, Innovation, and Leadership Initiative. So a bit of a mouthful. We call it UTILI, which has there's some origin to that word in French, basically, but essentially we came up with that acronym for this program. And we're a graduate training program funded by NSERC. So
a graduate training program in drone technology.
Absolutely.
I mean, that is mind-blowing. You know, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's something at the time we saw a need for this. We had companies coming to us looking for students who could fly drones, not just build them and not just sort of maintain them, but actually, geophysicists and civil engineers who knew how to fly. So we put the program together with my colleague, Dr. Claire Sampson, who was one of the founding co-applicants. She was at Carleton and then at OTS. And we put this together and invited a whole team of co-applicants to join us. And since then, we've been training master's and PhD students primarily in safe operation of drones, how to design missions, how to pick sensors and payloads, and offer a whole bunch of activities for the students through the program, as well as funding to support their internships, their training, and their research.
And what's great about this is that we have 6 universities involved. We have Carleton University, we have Queen's, we have University of Ottawa, we have UQO, ETIS, and Sherbrooke University. And also, we not only have students from those regions, but we have students from all over the world that contact us or our professors to try to join our program. And we train them in our rules and the way that we would train any Canadian pilot in drone flights and the effective use of that technology.
Wonderful. And today we saw a mix of new students and former students discussing their programs, what they had learned, their internships, everything from simulations to, we had people talking about variable airfoil thingies that were like, wow, this is scary stuff.
It's great because we have students from all different kinds of disciplines. So you saw students there that were in computer science, that were in aerospace engineering, geography, geology. So we have students from all different kinds of disciplines that actually come to this program to be able to learn how to use those tools for those disciplines, and of course try to improve it as well for other disciplines.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was so honored that you invited me to participate in the program.
It was such a pleasure to have you.
It was so cool. It was a lot of fun.
And I mean, a lot of our students, of course, they're learning how to fly and how to operate drones safely. And they've found your videos when you got started, and that's been a great resource for them, especially because they want to know how to operate in Canada. Right? That's the primary thing we're looking for. Although we do have some students who've worked in the U.S. or overseas, ultimately the vast majority come here. So we're hoping that they, learn all the Canadian rules, regulations, and just getting out there and flying safely.
Awesome.
Exactly.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Welcome back for lunch, everybody, online and here in the room. Very happy to bring us to our next part of our agenda today, which is our keynotes. Our special guest speaker, Joyce, who many of you may know from YouTube. I'm assuming a lot of the students here who got their RPAS license, they said they've watched some of the videos and it's part of their learning process. We're going to do something a little bit different today, rather than a PowerPoint traditional presentation. We're going to have a conversation, get some questions that we've put together with Dawn, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience as well as the folks online. So I'm going to give a quick introduction first. It's like a pre-flight checklist that you all need to do, and then we'll get right into things. So as I said, Dawn is renowned in the Canadian drone community. The DonDronesOn YouTube channel. Lots of videos, easy to follow videos, covering all aspects of safe and legal flights, drone flight in Canada. There's little doubt that most, if not all, Canadian drone pilots have seen those videos and learned from them as part of their training process for sure. In addition, the Drone Pilots Canada mobile package. Show of hands, how many people have the app on their phone? Quite a few. Perfect. makes safe drone flights quite easy here in Canada in particular. Lists, maps, procedures, the ability to documents, licensing, and things like that, and do all of your pre-flight, post-flight stuff. Don also leads the Drone Pilot Association of Canada, DPAC, which is represents recreational and small commercial drone operators. And I'll say that there's a lot of overlap between academic drone operators. We're all, in a sense, like small businesses. We have tight budgets and small workforces, sometimes maybe even one or two students. So we have a lot in common with the recreational and small commercial operators, navigating the regulations and everything else. So certainly a lot of common with that. DPAC as a group meets with Transport Canada regularly. These are posted on the YouTube channel to really advocate for safe and easy access to airspace, changes and modifications to the rules as much as possible, and basically to make things reasonable so we can fly safely. Don lives in Class C airspace, halfway between Toronto and Ottawa, and I just want to join everybody and welcome Don.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here, and I'm absolutely astonished by the projects that I saw being presented this morning. It's really cool stuff. And I do want that drone to land on my boat. So
We'll dive right into things. We have a few introductory questions, just questions. I'd like to hear a little bit about how you got into flying drones, how long you've been flying drones, and then maybe a little bit about the type of kit that you're using to complete.
sure, yeah. So I always have been kind of fascinated with gadgets and stuff. I'm an engineer, even though I don't have my ring on. My finger got a little fat. Yeah, I've always been into gadgetry and electronics and things like that. So back in 2016, my younger son actually bought me a drone, a Phantom 3 Standard, for Christmas, and it was like, holy crap, this is amazing. Flew it immediately and crashed it immediately. And so had a lot of fun. So it started out with the Phantom 3 back in 2016, Christmas, so 7 years ago, 7 to 8 years ago. And moved on to a Mavic 2 Pro and then went through a whole bunch of minis very quickly. Trees are very appreciative of my pruning work. So right now I'm flying really 2 drones all the time. A Mini 4 Pro, which is such an astonishing little thing. It's incredible. I just like it because it's so portable, so fast to get in the air, and the cameras and stuff are so good on it. So I'm flying that for kind of what I would call my better videos. But then I have this weird thing that somebody sent me for as a review drone. I get sent drones. It's the best thing ever. I get drones sent to me for free as long as I do a review. Whether it's good or bad, they are happy to keep sending me stuff. So I got this thing. It's fantastic. It's called a Hover Air X1. And it literally fits in your pocket and just unfolds one press. Within about 30 seconds, you have a drone following you around. You have a drone that's in front of you, acting like a cameraman, and it interrupts with your phone to clear out its own audio. It's so cool. So between those two, I know there's small drones. They're both under 250 grams, but honestly, for what I do, they're perfect. And I really like them.
I was about to ask if that second one is also under 250.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I think it's under 200. Yeah. It's really
So
solid.
anything about that packing.
I actually have a question for the Mini 4 Pro. I have a colleague who told me that they were flying it in their neighborhood. Although it shouldn't have been, but they were flying in the neighborhood, and they had a follow-me function, from my understanding.
Okay.
And one of the things that he was really worried about was that there are no leaves on the trees. But this drone was able to detect the tree and avoid it, and then continue following him. Have you experienced anything like that with that?
I rarely use the autonomous functions on the Mini 4.
Mhm.
For whatever reason,
You actually like to fly.
I actually fly it. Yeah, exactly. Now I use the follow me function on that Hover Air, as I mentioned, and it has no sensors, and yet seems to manage to avoid tree branches. So you watch the little thing I did a couple of weeks ago with a hike. And it's like flying through branches. And like, how did it do that?
I generally avoid videos like that because I can't fly a drone when I'm going to high school. So I'm usually not in the area when I'm allowed to do that.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but I will definitely check it out.
Yeah. Yeah. But the fact that the Mini 4 Pro can actually detect something as small as a branch.
Right. Well, I'm wondering, like, if they just detect the branch, they detect the entire tree and just kind of outline it and just avoid it.
Yeah, probably that's factored into it.
Because that's the way I would probably try to,
Yeah.
I got a question about your background. Now, the wonderful thing about the CREATE program is that we attract a diverse student pool. And we also have diverse industry partners. So for some of the students that we have, some of them are in geography, some of them are in cognitive science, of course, engineering. So we even have students that are from civil engineering, aerospace engineering, of course, mechanical, automotive, mechatronics. So we have this huge diversity. One thing that we found with a lot of our students is that they don't necessarily have an aviation background, but they're very attracted to the technology. And it seems that a lot of people are now adopting this technology without an aviation background. And they're essentially able to take their right. So we have this kind of diversity. So they're interested in the sky. So I'm really curious to hear about your aviation background and what got you into this.
Well, that's actually an embarrassing question, but I'm glad you asked it because I have no formal aviation background. I would say I learned more about aviation when I was, I'm going to say 7 than at any other point in my life. My father, who happened to be in the Air Force, but during my lifetime, he was a pharmacist. So he wasn't flying. He had a lot of interest in aircraft, and he kind of shared that with me to a large extent. But he liked to do paper airplanes. So I got into aviation, learning about paper airplanes, and he would teach me about ailerons and elevators and all this. And I literally, when I did my theory of flight videos, I actually pulled out of some dusty corner of my bookshelf a book about paper airplanes because I remember it explained all this stuff in such simple language. So yeah, so in terms of my formal aviation background, not a whole, well, nothing, but I learned a lot of stuff as a kid, practical on, hands-on sort of stuff. I also flew kites a lot and built my own kites. Had an enormous tetrahedral kite that I flew for ages. So I learned a lot about dihedrals and things like that. So all of the stuff that you see in there where I'm explaining, it's not Bernoulli, is from more recently, looking into things, reading about stuff, watching other people's videos and really trying to distill it down to the extent that you really need to know for passing exams, for understanding it from a droning perspective. I mean, you guys are doing a whole lot more than just that in terms of, the flexible wings and stuff. That's just scary stuff. But yeah, so my background is very limited. I just try to take complicated subjects and make them really simple.
And you do a very good job. Thank you.
Maybe a quick follow-up on that. Have you had any experience with a fixed wing drone? A lot of folks work with multi-rotor.
No.
Kind of the gateway drug, so to speak.
Yeah.
Has anyone sent you a fixed wing drone?
I wish they would. They can do that at any time. The closest I've come is when I was interviewing a gentleman from London, Ontario, who does the tornado study, what's it called, the Northern Tornadoes Project, where they go all over Canada chasing tornadoes and assessing the damage. And he mentioned he has one of these. And you mentioned what a wing trap drones that takes off vertically and turns into fixed flight.
Yeah.
And that is so cool. I love
That's a skill set that we really value when we value all our students. But students who come in with some fixed wing drone experience, like that is few and far between, but definitely, value that for sure.
Yeah.
Still.
No, back to my paper airplane is the closest I've come.
Yeah.
Have you dabbled with any kind of simulators, like drone simulators, by any chance?
I'm afraid not. No. I mean, I just get in there. I just fly.
Yeah.
I just fly.
Yeah, so that's probably one of the main reasons why I don't fly fixed wing drones, because I've tried those drone simulators and realized how bad it was.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. But I am getting a FPV drone.
okay.
So that's coming on Monday. But any luck?
Which can you say which brand?
It's the DJI about it too.
That's exciting. That's really
Looking forward to getting it. I've never flown with goggles on,
okay.
so that should be interesting.
You got any kind of
You
motion?
sit at this. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you better be sitting down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear that. I think that's one of the biggest tips that people say. Sit down.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Excellent. So we can talk a little bit. So one of the features of our program is that the students all go through their pilot training. They get their certifications for advanced operations, and then they, as you saw in some of the presentations, a lot of them are using drones directly in their work, just simulations and then using the lab. We also offer this grant, of course, Carleton that I mentioned, solid thinking, and we recommend your videos among other resources and stuff like that for the students to prepare for their exam.
That's awesome. That's just so exciting.
Yeah, state has a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
Making videos and keep up to date on the latest regulations.
Yeah.
It's great as well. So can you say a little bit about how you got into those, creating those videos in the first place, the root of them, how that kind of came to be?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I started flying my drone before the current regulations, and the regulations when I was flying were kind of crazy. Like you couldn't be within 10 meters of an ant, is it? Because you're violating something. But as soon as the 2019 regulation, one that we're currently living under, into the word announced, which was at the beginning of 2019. I started looking into it, obviously, because I wanted to continue to fly. I wanted to fly legally and all of that. And it was quickly apparent there was nothing out there other than just the regulations coming out of Transport Canada. There was no sort of driver's handbook, if you like, equivalent to learning how to drive a car. And I thought that's really strange. So I did a couple of videos. Just kind of explaining the basics of the regulations, and people suddenly were interested in my channel and started, saying, "Oh, that's really cool," and what about this, what about that, and so I really started just without any intent to become as crazy as it is now. I just thought, oh, I'll put a video, explaining how to get the basic exam, passing that, and what's in it, and that sort of stuff. So I put out a couple of videos on that, and then people started asking, "Oh, are you going to do the advanced?" And I thought, "Oh, that's not interesting at all. Look, who would do that?" And I thought, "Well, actually, I could do that." So I put out a little video about the advanced exam, and that caught on, and people were loving that. And then I realized, well, it's very high level. I need to explain a little bit more about, the theory of flight and things like that. And so I just started doing video after video after video, and then
I mean, it's a great way to learn, it's right? So to become familiar with the material.
exactly, yeah.
How did you come up with the name for your channel? That's a play on words there, but I'm curious.
Yeah, DonDronesOn. I have to admit, it was my wife, my late wife, who came up with that. She was watching a couple of the videos, well, before I even did the training videos, and she was always on about, I talk too much. So she said, "Yeah, you need a name for your channel. How about you Roan On?" And we kind of played with that, and I would give her 100% credit for coming up with a name.
Prior to sort of getting into drones and starting the channel, did you have any previous experience in training, like in industry experience, before you got into this? Was that something that was part of your job previously?
Yeah, well, it's not training per se, but I worked at Nortel for 20 years, and then moved to Alcatel and Alcatel-Lucent and Nokia. I just retired last September, in fact. And being in management, you're constantly presenting, either a status report or this or that. And I found that I enjoyed presenting. I enjoyed covering new subjects, summarizing things, this kind of stuff. And so I developed my presentation skills and preparing PowerPoint slides. My videos are all PowerPoint. I think in PowerPoint. I dream in PowerPoint. It's actually scary.
Yes.
So most of my skill, if you want to call it that, in terms of training, comes from management and trying to explain complicated stuff to people up there that don't have a clue. But I did at one point actually own in the sense of manage at least a couple of different training organizations. And so, yeah, I had lots of interesting discussions with people about how to prepare stuff, how to organize a training portfolio, and that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
And quite a few of our students here, especially the ones doing their PhDs, will eventually, a lot of them will become academics, I'm sure. And so it's good to see some practical examples of how to put that information together and deliver it. And as you said, explaining complex topics to find out the same background.
Yeah, exactly. And
Still,
it seems to be more common now, but when I was in university in the 1900s, which sounds like a long time ago. First of all, we didn't have computers. I was watching one of you guys present, and I was thinking, wow, my PC in 1983 was an IBM PC with 64K of memory, and we managed to get a robot that worked and had 6 degrees of freedom and all this kind of stuff as our workshop project. But my point was that back in those days, it was very uncommon to have a university program very centric on where one of the key goals was not the project itself, but the communications of that project, the presenting your project, convincing people that, first of all, that you knew what you were talking about, but also that whatever it was that you were doing was an interesting and useful project. So if when you're going through your projects, really concentrate on the communications elements, on the PowerPoint, on getting your message across, on responding to questions and that kind of stuff. It's such an important skill. And once you get through academic life, if you move into the real world, in quotation marks, it's so critical to be able to communicate to your peers, to management, to customers. I had one of my jobs at Nokia was as a quality director, where I was kind of the last line of defense. Somebody calls up and says there's a problem. They deal with the first level, then there's the second level of technical, then there's the third, then there's let's send Don to Japan to explain to these guys what we're doing to fix this problem. So I was the guy that was sent out, and they saved a lot of money because I was sent back in a body bag a lot of times. But being able to communicate to people who are not necessarily friendly, like you guys are, I don't expect one of you to, come up and wring my neck, maybe you will, but I was in environments where you were dealing with very concerned, upset customers, and they wanted a solution. They wanted it fast. They needed to understand why was it so difficult to fix this particular issue. Not that there were a lot of problems there. Sorry, Mr. Nokia. But it was a tricky situation. So I was sent out there partly because I had the communication skills and I could kind of simplify things down. Very complicated electronic telecommunications issues to stuff that people could understand, customers could understand and relate to and say, oh yeah, that is a tough problem. Take your time to get that solution right. Yeah.
I think that's very important.
How did we get onto that?
Well, actually, I was thinking like 1983, 64K computer was like top of the line, probably $3,000 in 1983 dollars.
One of my teammates worked at IBM, and he got them to donate one of the prototypes of one of those 64K computers.
Okay.
So we had it for like a few months. We were coding it in an assembler language. And like I said, we actually had to build our own. Our project was to build a 6 degree of freedom arm that would actually reach down onto a moving conveyor belt and orient itself to an object to pick up. We did that in assembler language in 1983, and it occasionally worked. I did learn how to use a milling machine. Like the number of skills that you pick up in these projects that you never think you're ever going to use, but they're so cool.
You can't order that on Amazon. Right?
No,
You can't.
Well, maybe you can.
Probably. Oh yeah, you pick them up Toys R Us and kind of stuff that we built.
So the next question is, I want to discuss your app. So this is the Drone Pilot Canada app. That Jeremy had just a wonderful introduction, because I know that he does, because he had the app and he was very excited about to use it. And some of the capabilities is it identifies safe flying locations, which is absolutely great. It offers flight logging capabilities, which is also a great feature. Crew and aircraft identification, weather at the time of flights, which is also very important, because there's been so many times that I've gone out and checked the weather beforehand and realized that, oh, maybe I can't fly right now. Checklists, procedures, and there's a whole list of features. So I'm just curious, how did that project get started?
Well, it started again back in 2019 when I was starting to do those videos, and I'm going, like one of the videos that I did was, well, it's a whole series of videos where I go through every single regulation and translate it into human language. And I'm going through this, researching and preparing 120 pages of PowerPoint. It's crazy. And I'm thinking, this just screams for an app. You know, it's like, who's going to carry around a binder full of checklists and keep all these logs on paper or even in a spreadsheet? It's just overwhelming, the amount of procedural stuff that you just need to have to legally fly. And so I'm thinking, that's just screaming for an app. I happen to know a guy that I worked with for many years who had just left Alcatel-Lucent, and we had become quite close friends at work. We had developed an app together. He was a coder, I was the stacker and tester. So I knew he was into app development. So I called him up, and I can remember this. I was up in my loft at my cottage and looking out over the lake, and I'm talking to this guy for like 20 minutes about, wouldn't it be cool if we could do all this stuff in an app? And he said, yeah, but who's ever going to use that? Who's ever going to buy it? And he says, we can never sell it for more than $10. And so we started to talk about what could be done. And I wrote a spec and sent it over to him. And we talked about it millions of times. That was in January 2019. We had he had the prototype of the thing running in May. So in 4 months, we went from nothing to having a working app. Not nearly the amount of functionality that we have today, but certainly it had the map, the safe flying zones, the checklist capability in there, and all that kind of stuff. The basics that we needed in there. We had it running in 4 months. In fact, our first version of the app showed the old flying zones before 2019 June, and the new. You could toggle it back and forth, which is so cool. So it went from there. So we just, we really click as two individuals. Like I can just kind of say a sentence, and he'll say, "Oh, you mean like this?" And I can do it this way, And then he'll say something, and I'll say, "Well, no, that's not appropriate for a pilot. We don't want to have to do this and that. We have to do it this other way." And he'll say, "Okay, cool." So I mean, one of my taglines is that it's what is my tag? It's an app built by Canadians for Canadian drone pilots, and that I think is the key. It's not somebody off. I'll slag off now Canada when I say this. It's not somebody off in Belgium creating this app. It's people in Canada who understand Canadian environment, how Canadians think, how Canadian drone pilots think, how we need to use things, how it needs to be simple, and that's the way it started out. In fact, one of my design principles, and it was applied to this app as well as things that I was doing at work, not apps, but similar sort of thing. If you need a manual, you fail. Now, I have a manual, I know, but that's kind of more of a here's what all the features are as opposed to how to do things. So yeah, so that's how it started.
Well, I think one of the most important features is the checklist, right? Because I know that we've had to deal with plenty of checklists in the past. especially with some of our custom fixed wing drones. I think it got to the point, Jeremy, where we had a checklist to make sure we had all our checklists.
We had the field equipment list and checklist.
Wow.
Checklist of check.
And so you custom
Well, it
you
was way before apps.
Yeah.
Yeah. Flipboard, pieces of paper.
Cool.
Filling out this
We had a
field.
binder.
Yeah,
We had a dedicated binder for our checklist.
we had SFOCs for every flight.
Yeah, so but to have everything in an app now is definitely far more convenient. Are you still adding features to your app?
Absolutely. Yeah. Just a month ago, maybe 2 months ago now, we put out a feature for wind speed at altitude. So when you launch your app or your flight rather, it actually tells you it does two things. It actually first of all gets the maximum wind resistance for the drone that you're flying, and it compares that to the altitude, the wind at different altitudes. I think it does 5 different altitudes, and it will give you a warning if you're close, or a more severe warning if the wind at a particular altitude exceeds your drone. And I mean, just in the last week, I've made 2 flights where it's like, oh crap, I better stay a little lower than I was planning because the wind speed is actually so high at altitude.
I'm curious. So I'm curious. A follow up to that. Where are you getting the data from? What kind of is that Environment Canada? How do you is that historical wind data?
It's not historical. It's instantaneous. Yeah. Honestly, I don't remember what we talked about a whole bunch of different sources. So I'm sorry, I don't remember which one Larry settled on, because it's got to be a combination of available, reliable, and
Somehow
and an API.
the amplitude.
Yes. Yeah.
So I guess you have 2 questions should have been put together. So how did these features get developed, and do you have anything that's coming up in the Drone Pilot Canada app?
Yeah. So in terms of how they get developed, sometimes they're ideas that I have. Sometimes they're ideas that Larry, Larry, my development partner, comes up with things because you'll find a data source. Hey, did you know that I could get? I think that's how that was started. In fact, wind one. Did you know that I could get the altitude, the wind at different altitudes? And I said, seriously? I didn't know you could get that. Let's do a feature on that. Well, how would it work? He said, do you want to know it all at once? And I said, well, I think it's better to do it like an idiot switch, or an idiot light. Because you get, there's so much information. And I think that really the key thing in this one was the fact that it only warns you when you need to be warned. You don't need to say, oh, it's 38 there and 37 there, and my wind is, yeah. So in terms of how it gets developed, sometimes I come up with the ideas, sometimes Larry does, and lots of times I get questions or suggestions from people who are using the app. And they say, I really want to be able to add my own custom checklists, for example. It's like, oh, yeah, okay, that's a good idea. And then we'll launch down that path.
Do you have a group of sort of beta testers, quote unquote, now that you're going to
Sometimes,
pilots who help you out to?
sometimes, but not very often. We certainly, when we launched the app we actually launched it in May the 4th, 2019. Yes, remember that day well. We had 6 different beta testers in the month before to make sure it worked, and we didn't have any. We did have problems, so we had to iron these things out. But now it seems that we got the process down pretty pat. The kinds of features that we're putting out are relatively, they're tweaks, they're little enhancements. So yeah. So going through the whole process of the beta test, while it's definitely a fantastic thing to do, it's just a lot of work. So yeah.
Should we expect anything new to come out soon?
Oh, absolutely. We're working on some stuff right now, and it's kind of a combination of a Drone Pilot Association of Canada project and a Drone Pilot Canada. I know it's all the same work. And an app thing. So it's partly a DPAC thing. It's partly an app thing. We're working on municipal bylaws. So, and I'm sure many of you know that it's one thing to be able to fly from an airspace perspective, but when you go out in some city park in Montreal and the bylaw guy who, stops and tells you not to poop on the lawn, turns around and said, well, not you, your dog. pretty sure that there is probably a bylaw against that. I think it's a law. Probably just common sense. But they'll also turn around and say, "You, by the way, you can't fly your drone here." So what we're doing is I've got a little crowdsourcing project going on with DPAC where we've actually compiled the top 100 municipalities in Canada, and we're getting the bylaws for each and every one of those, and doing two things. First of all, getting a link to those bylaws, and second of all, summarizing them into a very short sentence. And then we're compiling the KML geospatial information for those cities into Drone Pilot Canada, so that when you're in, say, Oshawa, Ontario, and you click on Oshawa, I want to fly here, it'll say not only your airspace information, your national park, your provincial park information, but it'll also say, by the way, you're in the municipality of Oshawa, and there's a bylaw here that says you can't fly from a park. Now, you may or may not be in a park, but you should be aware that there's a bylaw, and we'll have a very short sentence and then a link to the actual bylaw, so that you can go and read it all and figure out some loophole perhaps, or at least know how to get around it or what you can and cannot do.
I know some of those bylaws, like the city of Ottawa bylaw that predates amalgamation, was about literally model airplanes. That's the wording I talk about. And it had to do more with the noise of the little gas motors and everything else. But they carried that bylaw into, they use it nowadays for drones.
Yeah,
I don't have the same noise issue.
I would say about 75% of the bylaws that I've seen so far all use the expression model aircraft. And I think it's cut and paste from,
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
So the one thing that I really like about the app and what you mentioned is that it's now for Canadians by Canadians. And I think that's great. And it's not made, let's say, in somewhere like Belgium. So let's talk about
Not that there's anything wrong with Belgium.
No, nothing was wrong. But let's now move on to the NavDrone app.
Sure.
I have to use the NavDrone app to be able to get permission from Nav Canada to be able to do certain complex flights. But I still use the Drone Pilot Canada app because it obviously has some advantages. Would you mind highlighting some of those advantages? And is it something that you'd want to use in conjunction with the NavDrone app?
Yeah, so the NavDrone app was developed from a completely different perspective. Nav Canada developed it using a developer in Unifly, I think it is in Belgium. And from their perspective, it was all about air safety. It was all about making it easier for the air traffic controllers basically the air traffic controllers to prevent drone pilots from flying in a place that they shouldn't be flying without prior notification and authorization. So their perspective was, well, let's not have drone here, more or less. Whereas Drone Pilot Canada is more about, let's find a place that we can fly and fly easily. And by the way, before NavDrone came out, Nav Canada had a website, and Drone Pilot Canada actually had a way to pre-fill their to pre-fill their little website with all the data they asked for, and so you could submit an authorization request, and Nav Canada didn't even know. They just quietly commented to me, "Yeah, ever since June of 2020, the number of requests is like skyrocketed." And they said, "Yeah, that's when the feature came up." They were like, "Oh crap!" So in terms of so Drone Pilot Canada covers all of the requirements that you need except that authorization. And I would say that the biggest things that it provides you is all that situational awareness at the time of your flight. Now, the NavDrone thing isn't providing much of that.
No, it doesn't.
Right. Aside from you're in controlled airspace or not, or you're within proximity.
Have you tried to get that authorization feature somehow embedded into your app?
Yes, from the month before they released NavDrone, we were on the phone to the folks at Nav Canada who own this thing, saying, so you're taking away that, but you are, of course, providing an API and application programming interface so that third parties can, oh no, we never thought of that, was the answer. They didn't even spec it into the app, which was infuriating. So I provided a spec to them within like an hour
Mhm.
of, this is what your API should minimally do. And so, yes, we would love to have that kind of capability. And it looks like they're now starting to realize that they need it.
Okay.
They put out I'll call it a futuristic sort of forward-seeing, they call a concept of operations for 2030. And they're talking about third-party set interface with the outbound traffic management system. And you have to have an API for it. So
Yeah, it just seems so far away though.
it is far away.
It's
Yeah.
a couple elections away. Like I think there's enough time to tune in that. Is there anything that we can do as consumers or our program to help speed that up?
Well, anytime you put in a complaint to Nav Canada on the Nav Drone app, they do have a customer service mechanism. You can say, your app is really awkward and incomplete. We would love it if you would provide an API to third parties.
Okay.
I posted comments to the app,
Okay.
and they respond. They actually seem to be reading. Whether they actually, I guess, see that they responded to.
Well, I think if enough people do it and they're spending a lot of time responding, then maybe they'll actually act.
Maybe.
And then it's
Sooner.
Sooner.
We're not suggesting they're not going to.
how long that longer the contract is uniform.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and to be fair, it's a complex situation. It's because you not only have to get the authorization, but that authorization can be revoked. So it's not just one transaction; it's multiple transactions, and they've got a lot. I'll say this isn't their highest priority problem in the app. There's more fundamental issues in there that I think they need to make sure get.
Now, I do notice, for example, when we fly in an area where there's another drone operation, that the nav drone app will tell you that. There's another authorization in the area. It could be numerous, it could be surveillance, so we at least have an idea that maybe there's another drone in the area.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, that's great people. Sure.
Because otherwise, I have no idea.
Yeah.
I have no idea. That's right.
Now, what you really want to know is people who don't have authorization.
That's also very important.
And for the general public at large to be able to say, well, whose drone is that?
Yeah, careful. Don't touch her anyway.
I'm not gonna say it. I want to talk a little bit about the Drone Pilot Association of Canada. So you would chair the association and aim to advocate for safe drone flights, to improve the regulations and rules to enable and support our industry. Working with Transport Canada and other stakeholders. Can you tell us about how you got started, sort of similar to the app? So what were the roots of the association?
Yeah, so I've been putting out videos and communicating with Transport Canada about things that I thought they should improve for a couple of years, really, like since 2019 when I started the video up until continuing on today. But I found that it's not that they weren't listening, but it was sort of like just talking to thin air. They were perhaps interested, but not engaging in any way, shape, or form. And a couple of people mentioned to me, oh, Don, you really should, start an organization. And I'm like, oh my God, yeah, I've got all these videos, I got a life. I'm getting into yet another endeavor and a full-time job through all of that. It was just overwhelming. I was like, there is no way I'm going to do this. And then I decided to become part-time at work as a ramp down towards retirement. And so I became part-time in 2022. And as part of that planning, my wife and I were talking about how I'm going to fill those couple of days that I wasn't working. I know, all the more drone stuff. That wasn't totally agreed upon. But yeah, so that did open up a little bit of extra time. But it did become pretty apparent very quickly that having an association would really, really help. So over the course of the previous year, I made a lot of really important contacts across Canada with people who had, I'll say like-minded, but not same-minded kind of perspectives on droning, and a lot of talent out there. So I actually interviewed people. Some of those interviews I pretended to be just videos, so oh, let's have a video. We'll do a little video. I'll interview you, and I'll put it out on YouTube. So those individuals, I had an opportunity to meet them and that kind of stuff. So I formed a steering committee, and then it all kind of took off from there. The irony and sad part of this whole thing is this was it was almost exactly 2 years ago that I launched DPAC. I launched it, and then the next step was to form the steering committee that I wanted to do. So I had selected all the people. I hadn't told them who they were, but I was all ready to do the steering committee. And unfortunately, my wife had a stroke and died within 2 days. In fact, today is the second anniversary of her death. I had formed all of this baseline, all of this foundation. Sorry, I'm trying to keep my act together, but formed all of this foundation for this organization. I had these people on the hook. It's really interesting. I was interested in getting on with things, and I realized I couldn't do it. I could not. I was flat on the back. What I did was I contacted them. I told them what was going on, and I said, "Look, I don't want to lose momentum. I want to get this thing off the ground." And so they actually self-formed. They set up their own Teams meetings and got started and invited me along, and I was able to kind of go and listen along. And it was really, really great. I mean, they really bonded because they had to. It wasn't me kind of dragging them together. It was they had to pull themselves together. And I think that really was one of the key things that made it a strong organization and a strong team right from the beginning. Yeah. And believe it or not, within a month of us forming that organization, Transport Canada was contacting me, or DPAC specifically, to say, "Hey, how about we have quarterly meetings?" What? This is great to see, right? Yeah, it turned right around.
I was going to mention, it reminded me a lot of Ian, from the room, remember this, back when the NSERC in Canada, the WBS Canada, I mean, that's now going on 20 years, 20-something years. All the people involved in the industry, including the one lone Transport Canada person, fit in one room at the shuttle room and kick things off. But now you've got thousands of members.
Yeah.
Representing the breadth of operators, companies, trainers, and so on.
Yeah, 3,000 official members on through the website.
Yeah.
And I think we're at 8,000 or close to 8,000 on our Facebook group, which is like most people hate Facebook because it's so malicious and infighting and all those horrible things that Facebook is typically. But our Facebook group is so closely monitored. It is so friendly and so helpful and congenial. Yeah. It's amazing, and it's really helpful.
That says a lot about our industry in Canada.
Community. I keep that way. It's not just industry. It's community.
I joined your Facebook group first, and that was like kind of like my test before actually. So you got
awesome. Yeah.
You mentioned a steering committee. So how did that group get chosen initially? And has that membership evolved? Additional people coming and going?
Yeah, so as I said, I kind of met a lot of people either through comments or through different Transport Canada video forums on different things. I had met these individuals, and I was really looking for people who were, like I said, like-minded, like we not necessarily rule followers per se, but understanding different elements of how this kind of I'm trying to avoid the word industry, but how you work as a drone pilot. So I've got a guy in Kingston who totally recreational, has a YouTube channel, follows construction projects for the most part, and he flies multiple times a day. So here's a guy, and it's a controlled airspace. Here's a guy who has a lot of experience, knows all the issues that you have to deal with in terms of flying your drone legally and safely. And so, there was an individual that's like, yeah, this guy could really help. So we talked, and yeah, that worked out well. We have another individual who is former Air Force background, a lot of experience with with Transport Canada, with the RCAF, and flying manned aircraft, also flying larger drones. And the curious thing about this individual, Steve Bannister, is that when we started meeting with Transport Canada, turns out he was their commanding officer at some point. So it's a small world. It became an interesting dynamic as some of these individuals came up. So a lot of interesting backgrounds. We did have one guy who just became too busy. His personal life, became complicated, and he said, "You know what? I got to drop out." So we took him off the steering committee. We left him on. We saved his place at the table. And then we hired and volunteering.
And it is all volunteers, right?
It's all volunteers. Yeah, we're going to double their pay next year.
Great. What's next for DPAC? Did you have, is there a roadmap, or do you have some specific plans to evolve the organization?
Yeah. So the number one thing that we're focusing on this year is actually the municipal bylaws. That was our main goal for the year. Last year we wanted to get a safety program out there in terms of a simple course that people could watch, listen to, and interact with, much like the US Trust exam and the UK, I don't remember what they call it, but it's very similar kind of a program where it's not just an exam to get your certification. You actually learn a little bit, you're asked some questions, you get some feedback on what you did and didn't get right, very much unlike the Transport Canada exams. And so that was our thing last year. This year, municipal bylaws is the main thing. We do have a couple of other projects, but we're volunteers. We're all busy people, and we're just trying to get through a few things. But interacting with Transport Canada takes a lot of time. Yeah,
And sometimes effort.
Yes.
Yeah. So about a year ago, the Ministry of Transportation announced Canada's first proposed drone safety regulations for beyond visual line of sight and other operations. I'm curious, I've watched your video, which was very helpful, but I'm curious to hear, and for everybody else, to hear what your thoughts are on this new regulations.
right. Yeah, so the new regulations actually cover two dimensions: the size of the drones, and now there's a defined size from 25 kilograms to 150, I think it is, kilograms. So there's larger drones, now called medium drones. And then there's this very limited beyond visual line of sight capability in low risk situations, well away from populated environments and all that kind of stuff. So both of those dimensions are specifically, I'll say, industry oriented. And to a certain extent, institutional, like university kind of oriented research kind of applications. Larger drones doing things like cargo activities, even testing things of aerodynamic nature, they required all sorts of SFOCs and stuff. So these regulations are focused on the future of the industry. So from my perspective as DPAC kind of guy, focusing on recreational and very small activities, not all that interesting. I am very unlikely to be flying a drone of 150 kilograms. And if I do, move away. I'm not that good. So that's what the most sort of the central part of that regulation is. And it's really important. I mean, we really, really do need to move out of the small drone environment if the industry, if the research is going to be possible, easy. But there are a couple of little things in the regulations that are very important for, I'll say, regular folks flying their drones. One of them is, and they're both related to sort of beyond visual line of sight. One of them is a new regulation that allows you to fly around a building or some other obstacle. Now, the way it's worded right now is building or structure. So if you're flying behind a tree, that's still illegal. But it allows you to do that as long as you are an advanced pilot and stay within, I don't remember what the distance was, 50 meters or something of the structure. And just kind of going around the building is a classic situation for that. So that's the number one capability. The other one is, and that's called No, I don't remember what it's called. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. It's coming, but anyway, so the second one, which is beyond visual line of sight, is when you have a visual observer with you watching your drone, and you are, I believe it's 2 nautical miles away, something like that. Somebody's going to fact check me at some point in the, but if you're 2 nautical miles away, there's no way you're going to be able to see that little speck of the stuff. And what I've been advocating to Transport Canada for a long time is, why do we even need to see the drone? I mean, you want us to see the drone so that we don't run into an aircraft or an obstacle. Well, you can tell there's an obstacle if you've got your camera, you got sensors all around you. You're not going to fly into a building because you just don't want to lose your drone. And so from an obstacle perspective, you don't need to see the thing. And then secondly, if there's a manned aircraft approaching your drone, you don't need to see your drone, you need to see the manned aircraft. So I have been advocating for quite a while to Transport Canada to have it more of a situational awareness thing. So in the new regulation, as long as the visual observer can see the airspace where your drone is flying, even if it's 2 nautical miles away, and be able to detect and tell the pilot there's a helicopter approaching, then you're good to go. So between those two capabilities, flying around things and being able to fly a long way out, I think they've covered a pretty big gap in the, I'll say, normal sort of flights that people wanted to do.
Yeah. That actually was my follow-up question, which you already answered. And I already mentioned that you already have a video on the new regulations. Can you kind of just give an overview of what you cover? Because when I took a look at the new proposed regulation, I really didn't want to read it. And I ended up scrolling down really far until I finally got the part that was really important to me. So can you just quickly go over what you talk about in that video, and if you're going to have any follow-up videos?
Yeah. So in my video that I talk about the new regulations, I do kind of I skim it as well, because as I said, it's not for small commercial and for recreational pilots. There's not a lot in those medium and beyond visual line of sight regulations for us. But what I'm going to be doing over this year is covering those in more detail. And I can't do that until the regulations actually get announced, unfortunately, because they've got the basic structure and they've received a ton of feedback. And there's some specific areas that could go one way or the other that they need to address. One of them being medical requirements for the what's it called? It's the acronym, unfortunately, is bad too. It's ROC. They remotely RPAS, that's what the R stands for. RPAS Operator Certificate. Yeah. So they're proposing a new capability or a new certificate called an RPAS Operator Certificate. It's analogous to something that exists for manned aircraft, where somebody like Air Canada becomes an operator as opposed to a pilot, and they have very complicated checklists and procedures and a safety manager and a flight manager for maintaining the aircraft and things like that. So they're setting up the ability to certify your organization to fly a fleet of aircraft. And so that's one of the things that I need to cover as video is how do you do that? What are the requirements? What sort of things are encompassing in that? And one of the things that I think is wrapped up into those regulations is medical requirements.
Mm-hmm.
So these larger drones, they're not much smaller than real aircraft.
Yep.
Excuse me. And so what Transport Canada is suggesting is that you need to, as a pilot, you need to go and get your medical, an aviation medical certification. And there's a lot of feedback. I didn't provide any specific feedback that I recall on that one, other than you need to rethink this, since I can't even get a family physician. How would I ever get somebody to certify me as a pilot? But there's a lot more opinionated people out there and who have very specific information about that medical requirement that it's overboard. If you have any history of mental illness, for example, or even taking treatment for potentially mental illness, you're no longer eligible. It's like, hey, man, that doesn't make sense.
That was in the previous set of regulations. I remember the Gazette that came out for those. There was a medical. They were proposing medical exams then too.
Oh, is that right?
For the basic and advanced.
Yeah.
Back to the earliest. Thankfully, that did carry into to those, and I think if it did.
So I think they're pretty mature on that kind of stuff. They're trying it again, but
See where things
well,
Well, that's one of the things that I like about this technology is that it opens doors for people who wouldn't be able to participate in mediation as they would with criminals. So being able to walk people out just because, for example, mental illness, it seems a little bit too push.
yes,
I think.
yeah, I think so. Just
We're coming up on 2 o'clock, but
We are.
we want to hit one more question maybe, and that's probably where well, this is a good one for us to end on.
Oh, you're talking about this one right here?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. I was also interested in number 8 here.
Well, maybe we'll get.
Oh.
So the next one we'll cover is quite important for us, and it does relate to what you're talking about the rock, for example, this future potential requirement. A university like Carleton and our other partners, we have many drones. Carleton, we've got dozens of drones at an institution. However, they're under the control of individual professors, so we're not like in Air Canada. We're somewhere in between that type of organization and, let's say, collection of individual operators. So we're watching those regulations very closely because they could have serious impact on us. But one that is affecting us now quite a bit is this SFOC Special Fund Operation Certificate requirement for foreign operators. Yes. A lot of students are international students.
Yeah.
They do their advanced exam. Now recently things changed, so they could do their advanced exam and apply for the SFOC, but this is still an issue for barrier. Nothing like this exists in the US. So I'm curious your thoughts on this. Where do you think things might go? If you've heard feedback yourself from operators, this requirement, it definitely has an impact on stuff we do day to day for sure.
Yeah, and I do hear this quite frequently by email and by comments in the video about I'm not a citizen or a permanent resident of Canada, but I've been taking this university program or I'm on an internship, and how do I fly a drone? And it's horrible. And honestly, I think it's one of the subjects that actually makes me angry about the regulations today. Excuse me. Now that I'm angry. So the way it is right now is if you're not a citizen or a permanent resident, you need to apply as a forward pilot using that SFOC. And the way the regulations are moving forward, if proposals as they were written go forward, is that will still be the case, and you'll have to pay for that applying for that SFOC on top of just going through the process. And I think that one falls into the one and only $150 for an application. That's crazy talk. And this applies not only to people who are living and working and studying here, but it's also that applies to somebody coming from the States or from the UK with their drone over 250 grams. You think anybody's going to pay $150 to fly their drone in Canada? That's just insane. Now, it doesn't apply to drones under 250 grams, but it's crazy. And then on top of that, they slipped in this other stuff in the proposal about commercial. And it kind of falls into this operator certificate thing in some insidious way, is where if you are operating a commercial endeavor that involves drones, you can't do it. You can't even do a commercial endeavor unless you're a citizen or a permanent resident, because that's the equivalent of running a transport company. It's like, no, it's not. In my mind, if you're flying a drone, whether you commercially or recreationally, it should not matter whether you are a citizen or not, particularly if you have a certificate from another country that is equivalent or better. I mean, the right thing to do is to make an equivalency program. It shouldn't be that hard, at least for the majority of the case. I'm sure 50% of tourists coming here are American. Part 107, you got your Part 107, yeah,
Yeah.
you know? And maybe they have to take the basic or something equivalent to that. But for people coming from, somebody in the room said they were from Nigeria, I think you said, or India or any place like that. I mean, they may or may not have equivalent certification from their country. That makes a lot more sense.
Right.
And this whole business of commercial aviation activities. I mean, yes, you need to be eligible to work here.
Yeah.
And I'm not an employment law specialist in any way, shape, or form. But if you're allowed to work here, why can't you work here flying a drone?
And it's study. I mean, as students come here on a study permit,
Same thing.
to conduct research, to take training. We put a lot of effort into attracting students, right, to Canada as a whole, despite recent efforts, changes by the government with their study permits. This is supposed to be, open and welcome. Have students come in and have this opportunity to learn.
Yes.
So it's definitely been a challenge for us for sure. I know that with the proposal to include fees, one of the rationale that Transport Canada gave was there's a net economic benefit because the money comes in from outside to pay those fees.
Yeah.
The reality is that if the students are here, the supervisor pays the fees.
Yep.
Coming from a taxpayer funded research grant or a contract.
Correct.
It's not from outside, it's coming from inside.
It's all coming.
It takes away a little bit from something maybe by a camera or whatever.
It's time too.
Yeah, it takes time. Like, sometimes students are on a tight timeline for
Right.
thesis.
It also takes from your time as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of, sure.
So last question, where do you think this technology is going to take us?
Where's it going to take us? Oh man, that's a great question. I was hoping you wouldn't get to that question.
I remember with Sky, we didn't get to that question. I wanted to.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So where's it going to take us? I think I would say that there's three main avenues that I see. And again, I'm a recreational guy. So for recreational people, it's just better cameras, better duration, better this, better that, better goggles. So it's going to be better from a flying and a camera kind of experience. Or from an industry perspective, I think there's probably three elements. We're going to see actively real cargo drones taking, doing specific kinds of tasks.
Mhm.
And I'm not one that believes that Amazon's going to be off and packages at my house. First of all, I got too many trees. I was like, well, I'm trying my best to clear them with my drones, but it's not the best, not an economically viable way. But I don't see a whole lot of the drone delivery to the consumer as a big market. But I see, the hospital organ transplant kind of stuff. There's delivery of cargo to remote places, locations like in the north, or even on islands and things like that. I think that's a huge market. Drones are perfect for that and ideal, So certainly I think there's going to be a big push in that direction. I think that there's going to be a big push for more first responder kinds of activities. So fire, police, unfortunately, and police are the only ones who ever crash an aircraft. So
yes, I covered that in my class. Okay.
yeah. Sorry, your regional police, but that is true. And RCMP. And search and rescue. I think that environment is perfect for drones. It's and more of the capability, it's the longer life, the distances that as long as we can cover it off from a legal perspective, I think that's going to be a huge area. Then there was a third one, and I can't remember what I was thinking when I said that. But
Well, maybe you could save it for a video. And speaking of which, maybe you can share your YouTube channel address and give us any final thoughts that you have.
yeah, sure. My YouTube channel address will be right there underneath.
Yep.
But it's YouTube/DonJoyce, other name, or you can search for DonDronesOn and you'll get it that way. And sorry, what
If you have any final thoughts.
any final thoughts? Words of wisdom. So most of you guys are there, in university, just starting out, and drones are cool and fun and all that kind of stuff. So yes, take the time now to learn as much as you can. learn something that's going to be very specific so that you can get a job, because ultimately, you need to get a job, and support yourselves and your families and all the rest of that. So, try to keep things practical. Try to, I think this Mr. Flying, landing on roofs. There's a practical application. Sorry to put you on the spot, but practical applications, practical things that are tied to an industry need. Connect yourself with businesses as much as you can, get a job, even as an intern or a co-op student or something like that, with a business, and make that connection. I think that will be, your key to success. Really make that connection and make it solve a problem that somebody really needs to be solved. And I think that will go a long way. But honestly, as a final word, second most final word, have fun. Well, you're doing all of that. You gotta have fun. I mean, if this is turning into a drag for you, move on and find something else. Do something else. But I also want to mention, because it means a lot to me, keep a balance in your life. I mean, drones are fun. They're all consuming. I could do drones all day long, but you really need to have a balance in your life. So have some fun with the drones, but also make sure you establish relationships. Don't become too much of a nerd. Get out of too much. It's okay to get nerd, but get out of your basement. Have a life and have fun in the real world with real people every once in a while. So yeah.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you so much.
We're into our break time, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe if there's one or two questions from the audience here online, and would you be okay to take a couple?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then I have a small gift, but let's go to the questions and then
Okay.
so
Bernie's got his hand up.
yeah, go for it.
That's one question, DPAC. Are you coordinating with MAP at all, especially with relationships in Transport Canada? Especially now in MAP, as it come under CARS 9.
Yeah.
And the two worlds have been so separate once, and the model aircraft people.
Yes.
Is there any coordination with those two levels between those two organizations?
Yeah. So for those who don't know, MAC, MAC stands for Model Aircraft Association of Canada, or something close to that. It's basically the folks that fly replicas of real airplanes, remote control aircraft. So about a year ago, they had an exemption from the regulations, and they stumbled, I'll say, and lost that exemption. And so they've had to adopt all of the same regulations that quite often people have been living with. And so a number of the individuals at the time when they lost their exemption did reach out to me. I reached out to them as well, to the president. I did have a couple of conversations with them, and I've offered my help. We kind of exchanged views, but really they have chosen, for whatever reason, to go on their own for the most part and try to solve the problems as they see fit, which is great. They've got all the expertise. They don't necessarily need my help. I'm willing to help them, but no, there hasn't been a whole lot of coordination. I'd be happy to do so.
Other questions from the room?
Great. Yeah, that's great.
Awesome. If not, then again, thank you so much,
Thank you.
Sean. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been a great opportunity.
Thank you in the room and online. We're going to take a short break, and then we're going to reset.
Yeah, I think 5 minutes. We'll come back to you. We're
We'll come back.
yeah, we're a little bit behind time here, but
Before I forget, I do have on behalf of great program students, chocolates, actually. It is the book on the history of the Royal Canadian Air Force, because this is the 100th anniversary of the Air Force.
Oh, cool.
So, and this is also a book, a little history of aviation in Canada, which obviously connects to what we're doing now. So hope you enjoy. Hope you don't already have it.
I don't think so, no. But my father was in the Air Force, so this will be a great memory for him.
Thank you so much again.
Yes.